Game, begin.
Alright, hello and welcome to the Spike Colony podcast. Mike had a family emergency, so we are joined today by Dr. Evil, David Raczka, the harbinger of doom for the pre-modern format. David, how are you?
Apparently I'm getting eviler by the minute, so I'm doing great.
I mean, just when I thought the Phyrexian Dreadnought deck could not get any more difficult to defeat, you had Dominate and accumulated knowledge to it so that the big bad Terrageddons out there are being kept constantly on their toes. We recently came to a slight disagreement about how beatable Dreadnought is currently. I had a few comments to say about it. The first is I think you've turned the deck into a moving target. You talked about that on William's podcast a little bit, that it's to be fair, you talked about other decks being able to do the same thing. So other decks can obviously change the kind of looks that they're giving the Dreadnought player, but the Dreadnought player basically being able to show up with Tide combo, show up with Dominate, show up with Accumulated Knowledge, show up with Brain Freeze, and who knows what other technology is hiding in the bushes, makes it can make it extremely difficult to play against. Replenish has a little bit of that too, little creature pivots. Or not taking the creature pivots. And my attitude as of right now is that when I think about teching and counter-teching for a matchup, right now I think that the Dreadnought deck has sort of the last word, basically. That the thing that you're going to do might be really excellent. It might be Hidden Gibbons, card that we love. Might be Xantid Swarm, a card that we just saw win the matchup for HFEB, or actually Classic Feb against Dreadnought. Maybe some classic tools like Meddling Mage and whatnot. But I think that one, it's a burden on those decks to sort of next level against the Dreadnought, and the cost for the Dreadnought player to next level once more, maybe extra copies of Powder Keg. Dominate is already a pretty clean answer to Hidden Gibbons. Sort of gives it that, like, then what are you going to do type thing? Because sort of the in many ways, the floor of all of these sideboard cards is trading with Counterspell. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I think that's some pretty good points there. I think the deck is beatable, but also, like you said, it can pivot and improve a matchup. So if there's a lot of Terrageddon, you can pivot there. If there's a lot of Replenish, you can pivot there. So it can sometimes feel unbeatable because if they want to try to beat you, they can do so. I also think that a lot of decks that are underplayed, that need some love, even like colors, black, for example, they have some plans that are very basically unbeatable in a way. Any dark ritual start is into multiple creatures is very hard to beat. There's green, green has Hidden Gibbons, it has Xantid Swarm, it has all these like 1-mana permanents that even though Counterspell can trade with, it sometimes doesn't come online quick enough. Especially even like 2-mana permanents like survival decks usually aren't total dogs to Dreadnought, because if they are on the play, they can go turn 1 Mana Dork, turn 2 Survival. I basically get that foil. So I think there are ways to attack it. I don't think it's. I think the biggest thing that I wanted to bring up was that it's not the only good deck. It's not like Dreadnought is like a tier 0 and like all the other decks are tier 1. I think Dreadnought has the ability to adapt, similar to Terrageddon, where if you want to try to beat a certain deck, you can pivot your deck. You can play Pyroclasms, or you can not. There's different things you can do to pivot around And I think that Dreadnought's in a similar spot.
Yeah, I think I would say that one of the structure of Dreadnought helps it do what you're describing, but just a lot better than a deck like Terrageddon. When we talk about some of the ways that you've historically analyzed how decks match into Dreadnought, a big dimension of that has always been their access to card advantage and how much air is in their deck. And the fact that Dreadnought right now has access to, and also like unique access to card advantage, because it's really not any other deck that can play Accumulated Knowledge, Flash of Insight, and Gush. You can play like 2 of the 3, but it's really hard to play all 3. All 3 are exceptionally good at what they do. With one thing that did come up for me, which was that the one thing that they're bad at is keeping you under the maximum hand size of 7. like my problem, the most recent run I had of playing Dreadnought was like I was sitting there with all these card draw, all these like juicy cards in hand, and I was like literally just casting Dreadnought so that I didn't go to hand size, because I was just like I have this Stifle in my hand, I have this Dreadnought in my hand, I'm like I'm probably gonna hand size this Stifle, so I might as well play it. But I think that there's so much, like it's so difficult to conceptualize on each axis a way to gain advantage. Besides the one that you bring up, which I think is very relevant, it is probably the Dreadnought's weakest point, which is agency over the early game, right? So when you open up your starting 7, the Dreadnought player does not get to cast all the cantrips in its hand, right? So they'll have for the first 2 or 3 turns these sort of port-in impulse opting situations, and during that time, if your opening hand happens to contain Xandaswarm, happens to contain Hidden Gibbons, happens to contain Survival of the Fittest, maybe Pyrostatic Pillar, but we'll go on. we'll talk about that. You'll basically be able to pull one over, or Goblin Lackey, of course, is also a great example. Maybe you'll kind of get one through, and then leave the Dreadnought player with their only options, instead of becoming like Portent into Counterspell or Impulse into Daze. Their answers will just be sort of restricted to Daze, Foil, and Annul sometimes, which kind of is super sucky, because if you just lose the die roll, then you're also going to feel like you're in trouble, even if you have those good things in your deck, right? So like losing the die roll against Dreadnought is just super, super rough, because that opens you up to like turn 2 jam with Daze backup, which is like just so, it's like a subtle thing, but it just like increases the range by so much to be behind that one point of mana. So I kind of had a few experiences. I was curious, what's been happening with you recently, like what you've been playing. I mean, you might not even be playing Dreadnought, I don't know, but I did some testing with a friend of the podcast, SWB. We tested Fran's mono black Chain of Smog deck, and it was not even close. That deck just doesn't have a clock. The clock is Mishra's Factory, the Rack, and Cursed Scroll, and that was all like mana intensive or just useless, and also answerable by Parallax Tide, if that's the option that you wanted to take. We tested a very hateful burn list that I was trying out that had 4 Pyrostatic Pillar in the main deck, which I'm happy to report. If you get those sort of burn starts where you're on the play, like Pyrostatic Pillar improves your ability to win on the play over Ball Lightning, just for dealing probably more damage for more damage for less mana. But it was the same situation where, so long as the Dreadnought player, I mean, obviously, like the Dreadnought player is not always going to know they're up against burn, but you just can't do anything against turn 2 Dreadnought. Like you can't even really race it on the play, unless obviously a lot of things go right. You get that Fire Blast, multiple bolts type situation, and they combo with a Vision Charm, so they don't have that block up for one turn. And then SWB and Rich tested the Aggro Parfait, which is effectively just a Terragon list, green-white Terragon list with Gaia's Blessing against Dreadnought. And SWB had 4 copies of Hidden Gibbons, and they went 50-50. 2-1 for Dreadnought in game 1s and 1-2 for Dreadnought in sideboard game. So basically kind of left me in the position, and a lot of people are asking this, just like, what deck would you lay 2-1 against Dreadnought? The counterpoints there would be like Clerics 2-0 in Magic Online finals, like finals of sort of league play plus single elimination. I played against a Landstill deck that sideboarded Meddling Mage and Annul, and that seemed really good because they could match the card draw, hit all their land drops. You can't misdirect an Annul, which I found out. I did like exile my last win condition to misdirection. But so there's kind of some counterpoints there. But I think it's just so hard because, like, don't get me wrong, I think Duress Cabal Therapy, Stupor, Tempting Worm is gonna beat Dreadnought. But I also think that, you have the early game awesome draws. You have sort of like the mid, like you can like your ability to slow down the mid game is pretty unfair. So like I like that you brought up Dark Ritual and Mana Dorks. Those are great ways to like sort of reach the mid game for your opponent faster than Dreadnought playing 1 land a turn. There's like little tricky things there where, like, if you're casting Gush at a time that is sort of like awkward for you, or you're missing a land drop, your opponent can kind of capitalize on that. And then obviously the late game you can just kind of overpower with the card advantage engine. Where I stand right now is just that everything that I try that doesn't work just makes me feel worse. That's kind of my feeling.
Yeah. And it is a tough pickle to crack. You think, it's a blue deck, you just add blue hate and it's good. But the problem is that what Dreadnought's weak to is like 1 to 2 mana permanents. And there's a lot of them. Most of them, the better ones are ones that create card advantage, but the second ones are just really quick clocks, like Tempting Worm, Hidden Gibbons. Like, those cards just make it so they have to have that early Dreadnought or they lose. And they don't always find the Dreadnought, or they have to play unprotected and you have your 1 of Naturalize in your hand and you can kill it. There's a lot of cards that people could be playing in higher numbers that can help, like Thornscape Apprentice is an amazing card. It just taps down the Dreadnought every turn. And to deal with that, they have to stifle it, but they need 2 stifles. So it's almost like a way of card advantage, because they have to have 2 cards to deal with your 1. And you really can't counterspell or foil it. I think you can foil it, but you're probably pretty happy.
Well, the great irony is that the lower mana costed the permanent is, the better Powder Keg is against it.
That's true.
Like SWB put the 3rd Hidden Gibbons on the battlefield, and I was like, I actually think you shouldn't cast the 3rd one, because that's just asking to get just like completely kegged. But he needed the 3rd one, because if he had 2, then a Dominate would just eat both of the Gibbons.
Yeah.
So I think it's just that element of, like, when Red Green Oath was like the deck, you were just like, okay, well, what is Replenish going to do? It can never get to 4 mana. It's like, I just play Salva's Web, right? It's like, and then there's 4 mana. These other things are just so much more intricate. So I think that, Sam Black's deck is probably a good example. I think Sam Black's deck, if you go Hidden Gibbons into Argothian Enchantress, you're going to be pretty happy, right? Because, like, what are they going to counter? And, like, once the Argothian's down, like, now they're drawing infinite Plowshares and Seal of Cleansing and replenish your Seal of Cleansing type stuff. And, then they're kind of off to the races, and you're sitting, and all of a sudden they're drawing more cards than you. So they have both pressure and card draw. SWB's deck was a good example. It's like, if you do get that Hidden Gibbons down, then all of a sudden, you cast Call of Herd, you start attacking with Treetop Village, those things can be really threatening. It's just a little awkward, because if Rich has a Dominate, then Rich can perfectly time a, like, cast an instant plus Dominate your Hidden Gibbon setup against an attacking 3/3 for, like, the triple blowout. when I was testing the Pyrostatic Pillar, I was sitting there and my hand was like Pyroblasts and Pyrostatic Pillar. And I'm like a burn deck, right? I actually played 23 lands main and 24 lands, an extra wasteland in the sideboard. I was doing weird stuff with the burn deck. But I was actually sitting there, I was like, I have this Pyro Pillar. If I slam it on turn 2, they can just combo me. And then I didn't have, Overload plus Pyroblast. I just had Pyroblast. So I'm priced into holding up Pyroblast this entire time, or multiple Pyroblasts I have to hold up. Multiple Pyroblasts that I have to hold up plus an extra mana for days. And actually I sat there and was like, I can never cast this Pyrostatic Pillar because I'm trying to hold up these Pyroblasts. And you obviously Overload and Mog Salvage is better than Pyroblast in this context, but Pyroblast is a better sideboard card for Burn to have a lot of compared to the Shatter effects. So it ended up kind of feeling like, okay, like I now have to gamble, right? Now I can send this Pyrostatic Pillar and then hope that my opponent is going to try to play slower. But sending the Pyrostatic Pillar signals to them that they're like, okay, my only option now is like use it if I have it. And then if they have it, then I actually just end up losing or trying to top deck a clutch Overload. So I think the nuance for me is that you need excellent strategic dominance, where I think those sort of like clerics and maybe like black-green strategies are kind of there. And I think it's very hard for you to have like tech for like right now, like I think it'd be very hard for a Terrageddon player to be like, I'm going to win this matchup basically.
Well, so I think Dreadnought, every turn that goes by, they can use their cantrips, they can use their mana, they can sculpt their hand. So like in that Pyrostatic Pillar turn, you just jam that. You just play it in. You hope they don't have it. If they have it, they have it like 40% of the time. You might draw Overload, who knows? But I think you do have to jam there. Like you have to be aggressive. You have to be like, do you have it? You don't have it? Okay, you lose. Because Dreadnought only has 4 Dreadnoughts. There's not like most combo decks where there's like redundancy. It's just those 4, and they don't always draw them. I've had times where I've drawn like 30 cards and I haven't drawn a Dreadnought, So I think that's
right, but that doesn't happen twice in a match.
Sometimes I lost to goblins. I think he got a Goblin Tinker in play game 1, and then game 3 I was like 30 cards in, and I just never. So it can happen, and I think Terrageddon can fight back. AK was the surprise. They didn't realize AK was a thing, and now they know. And I wouldn't be surprised if I saw Hidden Gibbons and Phyrexian Furnace.
Yeah, I think I forgot to add that I think Phyrexian Furnace is like a pretty important one because it's so elegantly shuts off, the Dreadnought deck's ability to produce card advantage all of a sudden, and like those kind of little things obviously have the potential to make a huge difference. I had kind of a feeling from the Dreadnought side that now that I have all these AKs in my deck, I don't have to like board out Dreadnought or board out Vision Charms. Like I can just keep all 12 combo pieces in because I'm like, I can draw so many cards that like 2-for-1ing myself by getting a Dreadnought Swords of Plowshares like isn't even bad. In fact, it's like good to gain 12 life so that you can cast more AKs.
Yeah. I think the AKs allow you to jam more. I think that Dreadnought, like, basically, you just have to be a moving target, right? So people were like, oh, they're taking out the Dreadnoughts. They're not going to jam early. Like, we'll do this or that. Like, I'll play Replenish, and I'll cut my swords, things like that. So the way to combat that is to be able to jam early. And the way to do that is to have more card draw. So there is some back and forth, but they all have weaknesses. Like you said, AK and Flash, Phyrexian Furnace is a very annoying card. I also think that there are some decks in the format that have permanents that produce what Dreadnought produces in card advantage, but like every turn, like Phyrexian Arena, Argothian Enchantress, Survival of the Fittest, even like Weather Wayfarer to some degree. Like, for example, I've seen a lot of Terrageddon decks that don't even play Core Haven. Like, Core Haven's a great card against Dreadnought. So there's some room to, just tweak your deck, improve it. Dreadnought's an interesting position because if you just bring a brew, it's probably going to crush you. It's if you're not like trying to beat it, it's probably going to beat you. But I think the more people are aware of it and learn how it works, the more beatable it is. And that's maybe why I think it is beatable, because I have played it, and I think black is the least played color, and I think it's probably the best color against Dreadnought, So there are some just tendencies we have in pre-modern. We love red, blue, white, green. We like those a little bit too. I think because red is the only color that really doesn't have a good main deck answer to Dreadnought, and it's so prevalent. That's partly what boosts Dreadnought to be this thing where it looks so good. But I think in a different reality, people are, instead of liking red, loved Suicide Black. No one would even think about Dreadnought being the most best deck, because black decks would be around. I've had a lot of times where it basically is a permanent that comes into play, and I just can't counter it, and then it just wins the game. Turn 1 Hypnotic Spectre, or turn 1 Birds of Paradise into Survival, or they got Waterfront Bouncer in play, or Whipcorder in play, or a Thornscape Apprentice in play. There's a bunch of creatures that interact favorably with Dreadnought. There's a bunch of enchantments that can deal with it, and those are more annoying. If someone plays Oath of Druids, I kind of have to use 2 cards to get rid of it. So I have to
stifle it twice. I mean, if you have the vision shot.
Yeah, so there's things like that where it gets more awkward, and especially
unless that Oath of Druids reveals a Shard Phoenix, at which point.
Well, you get 1 hit, right? You block, you get your Ancestors Chosen. I think that there are basically the permanence is how you beat it. So a lot of people are bringing in Pyroblast, Naturalize, things like that, and those are good, but you want to do that in addition to some kind of permanent that can give you perpetual advantages while it's in play.
Yeah,
that's why I recommend Pyroclastic Pillars, because that's one of those kind of cards.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, I do agree that you could kind of basically say that if there was the curve was just higher on just people not bringing a deck that loses a Dreadnought, right? If you were simply at a point where if you bring Burn, you bring Pyrostatic Burn, right? Or if you bring Goblins, you bring Goblins with 3 Goblin Tinker, 6 Blast, something like that. But otherwise, you don't bother bringing Iggy Pop or Oath Ponza, I guess, which is actually an adjustment people have made, right? So the thing is, it is actually interesting because I would love to have seen, the data on immediately following Lobstercon and then immediately following Lobstercon, right? Because it did feel I hadn't seen a red-green Oath player, in a very long time. And I certainly wasn't seeing them in results. Just one top 8 in Milwaukee or Madison, I forget which. And then Europe, where that deck is actually played pretty often. It just wasn't really showing up. So those kind of, but it was also so weird because Europe, you wouldn't see a lot of red-green Oath, but there's no Dreadnought players either. So it's just why did they stop playing red-green Oath? So those kind of metagame effects, this was something that we talked about on this podcast, which was just you don't actually have to necessarily say that, a bunch of people need to play anti-Dreadnought decks. A bunch of people just sort of equally need, if everyone added 2 to 3 cards to their deck for Dreadnought, that would have a net effect of holding Dreadnought down. But I think it's really hard to sort of be in a spot, because I do think that the Dreadnought situation right now is a play the best deck or play a deck that you think beats the best deck, and it does have a little bit of that thing, because that's happening a lot in contemporary formats in Magic right now, where it's just some best deck will just emerge, and people will play something that they think beats that deck, but it doesn't really actually beat that deck, and then those people who are trying to play the anti deck like won't succeed at the tournament. So I think it's like a big question mark. I like, again, like clerics popping off or various black green. I mean, the black green pitless rack was like the Polish national deck, so I don't know if the Poland metagame was a Dreadnought metagame. I know there was like enough red in the metagame where like that Tempting Worm main deck situation was always going to be good. But yeah, I don't know. Like, you're just going to Tempting Worm and I'm going to dominate your Tempting Worm. And like, isn't that like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, put yourself in the shoes of the most pessimistic person in the world. Like, I know that I'm a very exaggerated, thing, but at the end of the day, I still feel like, I play enough matches that like I'm getting a feel for things, and I do go on vibes. But like, just like think about the people who like are just throwing shit at a wall and just being like, oh man, but then they're just gonna do this, and then they're just gonna do this. Like, I feel like you can feel some of the frustration that comes from that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the main things, like, I have a few points. One, data that Raczka's been doing is pretty cool. It's not perfect. It's still small enough that you have to take it kind of with a grain of salt. But if you take their data and you take out Sly and Goblins from the metagame, Stiflenaught doesn't even have a 50% win rate. It's mostly because we just love Goblins and Sly. They're like the two of the top 3 decks play wise, that amount of red is basically boosting Stiflenaught's win rate. And also another thing you can see if you look at that data, which is really cool. I think it's data.Dreadnought or something.
Yeah, data.Dreadnought.com.
Yeah. You can see like what the average win rates are for different things. And there's 4 decks that basically have a similar win rate to Dreadnought. So it's not like the way I built Dreadnought was like, I can't beat Replenish, which is another one of those great decks. And like, I just kept on like trying to figure it out, and basically all those top 4 decks, I don't want to play any of those. All those decks are really good. They can totally win against Stiflenaught. If you just configure it, think about it.
That's a tricky one though, because Replenish is just the second most complained about deck. I mean, it's actually the first most complained about deck because it's played in Europe, right? Europeans just like don't complain about Dreadnought because it's not there. Like, they're complaining about Replenish and Tide Control.
And they're both combo decks. People usually complain about the combo decks. Like, even though Terragon and Survival Rock are great decks, people aren't complaining about it because they can still play their game. They might lose,
they feel good about themselves.
Yeah. So that's part of it. Another thing, what was your other point? I had a different point. I don't remember what it was now.
Sorry, I do 4 things at once.
No, it's okay. So like if I have Dominates for Tempting Worms, that means I probably don't have Parallax Tides.
Right? But why not? Question mark?
Like, you only have so much space. So there are, like, I think you can build a Stiflenaught. If I say I want to beat this specific deck, like, I know Lanny's going to bring, I don't know, Grotog.
It's always Grotog. You won't catch me playing clerics. Like, that's the thing. It's like, who's actually going to play clerics? Like,
yeah. So like, if I know you're playing Grotog, I can make my deck beat you. If I know you're going to play clerics, I know clerics is like the best deck, I could probably build a Stifledot deck to beat it. And I do think there's just some like psychological things here. I am a person that I get very antsy if I don't have cards in my hand. Like, I'm not a very good burn player because like I just physically am like, I have nothing to do. Like, I need something to think about. Like, I'm just like, if they're dead on turn 4, I'm good. But if I didn't kill them on turn 4 and they're like 10 life and I'm sitting here drawing like 1 card for a turn and hoping it's good, like, I just have a hard, like, it's not enjoyable, right? And I'm like trying to enjoy myself here, so I basically just gravitate.
It sounds like you're not a huge fan of blackjack, is what I'm hearing.
No, I don't like blackjack.
Like, I've got
more chess.
Like,
chess
I've got 10 double down. Thank you very much. I'm slamming the top card of the deck on the table, and if it's Lightning Helix, GG.
Yeah.
I just love that. I love that you're saying chess instead of blackjack, though, because that's just ridiculous, right? Like, that's like.
Oh, I love chess. Chess is fun because you can think 10 moves ahead, 12 moves ahead. What if he does this? What if you do that? Anyway, So I basically pick the deck that has the most cards, draws the most cards, filters the most cards. That's why I love playing it. So every turn, like my chance of winning goes up, which I love. Because if I'm playing, I don't really care how much I win. I like how long I'm winning. You know, that's like the enjoyment factor for me. So if I win in like 2 seconds, I'm like, that wasn't that fun. But if I win in 20 minutes, I'm like, oh, that was a great game. So the decks that beat Stiflenaught are the exact opposite.
Yeah, they're just short like, game, like the more mulliganing, like.
Yeah, you like look at your open hand and go, here's my hand, do I win? And you're like, yeah, I can't stop that. That's basically how the game goes, you know? So it's
actually blackjack. It's like, oh, you just described blackjack again.
Yeah, like I lost to like turn 1 Dark Ritual. I'm like, okay, I'm going to foil if it's a Hypnotic Spectre. And then he went Duress. Okay, well, that's okay, I guess. And then he went Cabal Therapy. And then you played like a, Sarcomancy. And then next turn you played Skidding Scourge. And now I have like 5 damage clock on me, and he just ripped, multiple cards from my hand. You saw the Phil's matches against Clerics in the finals. He had a situation where Kingslayer, he went turn 1 Dark Ritual, and Phil had a foil, right? So this is why Dark Ritual is so good. Like, are you going to foil the Dark Ritual? No, that sounds awful. If you go turn 1 Dark Ritual and someone foils it, you're like, yes.
Yeah, that's a pretty good so Dark excited. Ritual. Little 3-for-1.
Yeah, and so then you played Priest of Gix. And you're like, well, do you foil that? I mean, it's like, you're just a 2-1. Like, are you going to discard 3 cards to kill a 2-1? So he didn't counter it because it was his only land. He had only 1 island, right? So if he foiled that, he'd have no lands in hand and just be like hoping to draw an island. And then he followed up with a Rotland Reanimator. So now he had 4 power on the board. Even though Phil had the foil to like stop whatever would be good. Like if he had played Goblin Neck, he would have foiled it probably, or whatever. Something that would really win the game, he would foil it. But because of like the way Dark Ritual hands work, if you're playing multiple threats, it just feels really bad to pitch 3 cards.
Yeah. This is the 3/1/1s argument, which is good against every hand except for turn 2 Dreadnought hands.
Yeah, and so Dreadnought has 4 Dreadnoughts. If you have 8 answers of Dreadnought in your deck, that's all you really need, because then you play the odds. It's like blackjack. You have 8. I have 8 cards. You have 4. So if you go turn 2, I have 8 ways to stop your 4 outs.
I feel like the dealer. It's like the dealer has 20 a lot of the time, though, because the dealer's not showing 1 card in this analogy. Like if they're showing 1, and actually, what are you going to do if they show 1 card? They're showing 1 card and it's Dreadnought, and the other card is face down on the table, and you're just like, God, I hope that's not Stifle. I'm with you. I think that that's an interesting effect, because what ends up happening is that it's the inverse of what you're saying, right? Because the victories against Dreadnought are short and losses against Dreadnought are long.
Yeah.
And good.
Then like that's less enjoyable for you playing Dreadnought, because every time you lose, it's like this long. You're just losing for a very long time. And so I think there's that psychological aspect too. Yeah.
I mean, I can see it. I think that it is going to be interesting to see. Like, so what do you think? What do you think about Lobstercon? What do you think about this sort of like giant room, 300 people? Is it just going to be a Dreadnought fest? Like, do you think that if we podcast hard enough, people like we can get 150 or 300 people to like play Clerics? Like, what do you think is going to happen? Or what do you think needs to happen? Because I would recommend the Spike Colony audience to start practicing Dreadnought right now, and also start practicing Dreadnought Mirrors right now, and maybe figure out if we can play, like, I don't know, 1 Parallax Tide main, 2 sides, so we can fit in 3 Dominates in the sideboard with the accumulated knowledge in the main, and maybe some powder kegs for good measure. like tweak the numbers. Like maybe we can just get away with 2 tides if that means we can get 3 Dominates, and then our accumulated knowledges are just going to dig us into the tides anyway, so it doesn't matter.
And then you add some islands because you have a higher curve, and then you add some powder kegs.
I do want to add some islands. I did finally get to the spot where I was just like, the only thing that makes this not work, like, I'm good with like cutting random stuff in the main deck, like trim and op, trim a daze, trim a whatever, like trim a impulse, like put the AKs in. But the one thing that's just like basically really, really hard to do is to be like, okay, well now I kind of want 19 lands, especially if I'm going to board out Mistress Factory against Wasteland.
Yeah. I saw that. I saw your video, and against Terragon, Gush is kind of a liability. I usually side out like just one, so I don't have to be stuck with multiple Gushes and 7 cards in my hand and like, discard and like not have islands and all that. I think what's going to happen for Lobstercon, there's going to be, well, first of all, like the aggro decks that say, okay, like have it Dreadnought. The black decks are interesting because they have Cabal Therapy. Like I lost the finals of that Winter Ball, Rock Royals Winter Ball, because he's a black deck. He has like removal spells, right?
Yeah, and then he just didn't. He just doesn't.
He didn't have any removal spells. He just had like just the rest. Cabal Therapy. Like my Dreadnought was safer in play than in my hand.
Yeah, but you didn't know that, so you. Can
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, so you can build your decks that way, where you build them so that Dreadnought's scared to like just turn to you. Like you don't want to go turn 2 against like Landfill, for example, because they have so many cards that can counter your Dreadnought or swords that are disenchanted. So if you build your deck in a way that can like capitalize on that, like I've done that multiple times where maybe it's just like my own follies and things I have to improve on, but black decks apply pressure, and I'm like worried about playing my Dreadnought because they could kill it with like any removal spell, which I smother, snuff out, whatever, and then it's like too late. Like they Dark Ritual a creature in play, or they played a Rancor, they changed the clock enough that I can't race them anymore. I've seen a really cool landstill decks that play Phyrexian Furnace, Melee Mage, and Null that I think is very good against Stifle Knot. I've seen.
I thought that in particular was like pretty interesting, because we were kind of like previously like Landstill was going to be like a tideable matchup. Because you had Stifle for Decree of Justice, which was pretty solid. Tide obviously takes care of the man land, so you can kind of cut out their clock, and then of course just rely on your pure card advantage engine to close things out. But Meddling Mage definitely, I don't know, it kind of felt like a small thing, but it was just also all it took, right? Because you're kind of you can have the Mistress Factories to try to block the Meddling Mage, but they're a Dust Bowl deck, and they can kind of have their way. And then one thing is that we counter Factor Fictions in this matchup, but there's this very difficult to just deal with the card Standstill.
Yeah. So like Standstill and the AK AKs probably are countered by AKs, but AKs against Tides are very good because they're cheap and you can get multiple cards. So yeah, like if you're playing Standstill, you get the card draw. Like control decks basically have to fight 2 things to beat Stifle Knot. They have to have Pyroblaster and Null to counter the Tides in case they have Tides, and then they need things that make it so they can trade over multiple turns, because the control decks, they have more expensive cards like Mana Lake Counterspell compared to like Foil Days. So if you exchange over multiple turns with the control deck, you don't get punished for having bigger spells, basically, and you can refill. Like Dreadnought's trying to have more cards than you in a period of time, so that like the 2-turn window that wins the game when you play the Stifle Knot combo, that like you just have more cards, you just counter whatever they do, and then you win.
Right.
And then I've seen, like, I think it was maybe been Polish Nationals, might have been a Czech Nationals, I'm not sure, but I saw like a Stifle Knot versus Mono Blue Tide, and the Mono Blue Tide person, he played it beautifully. He like stifled like Portent triggers. He traded his cards at any opportunity he could. So that what happened was then he landed the Standstill, and then he could reload, and he didn't have to like discard the Standstill. Because what can happen is if the control deck's too passive, then you play the Standstill or whatever, and then if I activate it, you just have to discard. or you play you don't even can't even cast your Fact or Fiction because you're going to discard the hand size. So like there's a lot of stifle knot things in the control mirrors about hand size, but bottom line is if you have
we need Spellbook
to like start fights. Spellbook, yeah. Play Spellbook. I mean, that's why Phyrexian Furnace is so good. You store a card, basically, and you cut off the card draw. So, like basically for that matchup, you have to have Pyroblast or Null, something that can counter Tide, because basically the Tide punished people for having Disenchant instead of the Nulls. So, like, I've seen people convert there. And then the aggro decks, there's tons of just, like, random creatures that are super annoying, like Waterfront Bouncer and Whipcorder, and I think there's probably some black creature that destroys creatures, and there's just like a random stuff. Plague Bearer, yeah, there you go. So there's just random creatures that like Headhunter, for example. Like I don't want to counter a Headhunter. Like if you go turn 1 like Dark Ritual, or you don't even think you would turn 1, just like turn 1 Duress, turn 2 Headhunter. Now, like, what am I have to have the factory, or like I'm discarding a card every turn. Like every turn you get a card advantage. Like that's what I'm talking about. Like I think the aggro deck's doing that, and like the green Terragon decks, they really ramped up. They played a very passive game with like 4 Pyroblast, 4 Disenchant, 4 Swords game. I mean, you just playing like some Thornscape Apprentice, some Hidden Gibbons, some what was the other one I was talking about? Well, those kind of things. I think. Yeah,
I think you would have to like play. You'd have to play the white Spell Shaper, because if you load up on Thornscape Hidden Gibbons, then everything's just getting kegged, and then. Yeah,
but you can do like Ramagen Lieutenant, the Ramagen Sergeant into Whipcord. You can do that. This Furnace also gets hit by keg.
Yeah.
But if keg is the only thing.
Yeah.
Keg is interactable. Like you have to wait a turn. You can hit all your naturalize effects. You can protect it pretty easily.
Yeah, but then I'm gonna play 4AK. My 4AK keg version is just gonna have all the vision charms and stifles up, so I'm just gonna vision charm my keg.
There you go. I
think that I don't like the Terrageddon example, because I think Terrageddon is in the bucket of decks that don't get to do too many good things versus Dreadnought, because they'll lose to the pure card advantage because they don't put enough aggression into their decks, right? So like even if you have Hidden Gibbons, all of your aggression comes from Treetop Village, Werebear, Call the Herd, and Terravor. So Terravor is never more than a 2/2 in the matchup. Call the Herd costs 1,000 mana. Treetop Village costs 1,000 mana, and Werebear is a 1/1. So like, like these are all just like not real like beatdowns. Like I'd be much more impressed if they could put some reasonable power on the board, because it was interesting. I was watching Rich and Steven play, and it was like, okay, like Steven's got all these Hidden Gibbons on the table. Rich is like basically like feels like he's playing against Landstill, but he's playing against Landstill that is not attacking. So then they're just like draw pass, and then Rich was able to just reach the point in the game. Now, granted, he did lose some post-board games to Hidden Gibbons, and he was like, yeah, I'm pretty scared of turn 1 Hidden Gibbons. Like, it is taking a lot of Rich's agency away. But all that said, it actually felt like what it felt like to play Hidden Gibbons against Burn, where they're just like, okay, well, I guess I'm not playing instants. Now, Burn has far fewer instants than Dreadnought, but you can still pour Int, like.
Yeah, I mean, Hidden Gibbons is almost like a preemptive Pyroblast. Like, you play Gibbons and then it's like Meddling Mage, and then they're like, I want to counter the Meddling Mage, but then if I do that, I'm taking 4. Like, so I know his version, I think it is red, white, green. So like, didn't have the Meddling Mage.
Yeah, he could be blue. He could be blue, white, green instead with Meddling Mage if he wanted. Yeah.
So like, and like, how Enchantress, Hidden Gibbons into Agrathi Enchantress is so good is because the Hidden Gibbons protects their Enchantress. It's like, if you want to counter my spell, you're taking 4 a turn, and that's significant. So I
will add that you don't want Powder Keg or Dominate against your Enchantress opponent. I like Gibbons a lot more in Enchantress. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. So there's give and take. Like if I have first of all, Terrageddon was the worst matchup before AKs. It was just awful. So it's just like, how do you build your deck? And if I bring in the AKs and bring the Dominates and the Powder Kegs to be Terrageddon, then I don't necessarily have the tides or the amount of tides or the amount of chains I want to be replenished, or and so there are some gives and takes. And maybe there is some coalesced version that beats it all. But what I do know is if you play AK main, which is what you kind of have to do to play all those cards in the sideboard, AK is not good against the aggro decks. You don't want to pay 2 mana to cycle your card. And then the second one's like decent, but you really won't.
You won't cast the second one. It's just like you'll have won or your opponent has won. But my answer to that is actually pretty simple because I am, literally the biggest impulse lover on the entire planet, and I've been told for years now that impulse is too slow. And like my only comment towards that is like, sure, but in that case, I will use the second strongest impulse in the game, which is my mulligan. So like I agree with you, but I think that the percentages are at least debatable, right? Because you're basically making the case that impulse and opt and days, all super, super important, lose you a significant percentage in the aggro matchup. And my counterpoint to that is just that, like, I think in the aggro matchup, so many of your games are decided by 1, winning the die roll, and 2, just having it. And the portion of the curve that is like turn 3 combo after casting an impulse is not as large as the portion of the curve. It's not it's statistically significant, but it's substantially not as large as the like portent into combo or just combo on turn 2 or turn 3.
I could see that. I mean, I'm not arguing that Stifledon isn't a good deck. It's a good deck.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I don't know if it's so much an outlier compared to other decks. And a lot of the times that Stifledon is really good is when you know what your opponent's doing. Like if there's open deck list, I think Stifledon has an advantage there because I know I'm playing against aggro and I have to mulligan to Stifledon or whatever. But
your mulligan decisions already in game 1 in the dark tend to bias towards made hands or very very strong draws, basically. So like your Dreadnought plus cantrip, your obviously full combo is just a snap keep. Like force check hands are a snap keep, and then obviously the best thing about force check hands of just like having combo is just like if your opponent looks slow, then you can wait, but if your opponent looks fast, then you can force check them. And then of course strong draws, which is like Dreadnought plus portent, or slightly weaker being Vision Charm plus portent. And then of course those come with good extra goodies, right? Sometimes those come with foils, sometimes those come with dazes. So like if you do hit your hand, it can turn into, the strong draw can turn into an unbeatable nutted hand. So
I play Dreadnought to my tendency in general in Magic is I keep looser hands that don't fold very easily. So I generally tend to not mulligan to aggressive Dreadnought hands. In my experience, it's not means that's not the correct thing to do. It's just like my tendency. So maybe that's why I lose more against aggro and I beat more against control.
I feel pretty strongly about this, right? Because if at least you take 1 mulligan, it's very likely that you'll be able to recoup the extra card against control, especially if we're in the our deck contains accumulated knowledge world, whereas you can never recoup the early game against aggro. Like this is the kind of discussion that is crazy because we are 2 Dreadnought senseis, right? And the thing is, whenever I play Dreadnought, all I can think about is how to make the Dreadnought deck more powerful. Like, it feels like ice skating uphill to try to make other decks beat Dreadnought. Whereas, like, I'm like sitting there, I'm like, oh, this is all I have to. Like, I lost the match against Terragon, but I was just like sitting there, I was like, oh, I just could have done 2 things different. I could have changed my list, and even with exactly the same list, I could have done something differently. And then, of course. The other thing is, if you are going into a tournament like Lobstercon, you can be the Dreadnought player that is forcing your opponents to be honest, right? So if your opponent's an Enchantress player, like my Enchantress opponent didn't have Xanad Swarm in their sideboard, evidently. I mean, maybe they did, but I never saw it, right? And like, so I just won because they just didn't have that kind of technology in their sideboard. But if you're another person going into this tournament and you're playing, whatever it is, maybe some kind of beatdown deck, maybe something that's tech for Dreadnought, you don't you have to deal with the possibility that you just won't see a lot of Dreadnought, right? That you have to win your first 4 rounds before you're in the 4-0 bracket and you're going to face Dreadnought. Like, as a Dreadnought player, you know, you said it yourself, you're playing chess and everybody else is playing checkers. Like, you might run into somebody else who is also playing chess, but you'll always be playing chess when you're Dreadnought.
I feel like Dreadnought is a little bit of like a pub stomper deck. Like, if someone's just like, I'm going to play, like, well, at first I was going to say like Green Stompy, but then actually Green Stompy is actually pretty good against Dreadnought. But what my point is, like, if they're playing like, I don't know, Yavimaya Fires, you know, they're like, I'm going to cast Sapling Burst. Yeah, like, you
or the Rock.
have, yeah, the Rock. Well, the Rock is actually not a great matchup. But they know what they're doing. Like, there's a lot of agency, and the people that want to do well can do well. So I read this article recently. I think they might have put it on the Pre-Modern Discord, where they're talking about how Garfield didn't want to ban Necro. Like, because he was playing this game, or he something about this game, and how the best character at lower levels was the worst character in the higher levels, and vice versa. So all the people who just started the game, the most busted character they had like free access to, and they thought it was bad, but then like the people at the very high levels thought it was the best thing. And I feel like that's kind of like Dreadnought, where the people at the low levels think Dreadnought's like stupidly good, right? But I think as you work your way up and you tweak your deck to beat it and try to like get to that level where you're playing better and better decks, I think it gets worse and worse.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but I think that the scaling effect is like a little bit different, because I feel that way about land tax, right? Like, so I think that land tax was the perfect example of a card that, like, I had no difficulty playing decks that beat land tax decks, because, land tax had some exploitable vulnerabilities. It just wasn't a good card advantage deck when, it wasn't a good card advantage deck. It had Enlightened Tutor in it. So it's like, if you disenchant the land tax, you 2-for-1 them, and they're waiting till they draw another Enlightened Tutor or a land tax. So if your disenchant happens to be a Ray of Revelation, they would just never be in the game. They just would never be able to draw cards, like that kind of stuff. Like, Ancient Grudge might Ancient Grudge might have been the card that we needed in this format.
People like land tax is a perfect example, because people were trying to destroy the artifacts when all you had to do is destroy the enchantments. And that's one of those decks where, at the top of the metagame, maybe it's not super, super busted, but at the lower levels, people were clawing their eyeballs out. So, well, they literally couldn't win. And for what it's worth, some of the I would say like medium or high level, right? Like, I think there was a lot of people who were like, oh, I can beat land tax with these this variety of creature decks. And I was like, I have severe doubts that because the land tax deck was so good at beating exactly creature decks. It was kind of like the thing that we were saying about Dreadnought, which is like, well, we designed this Dreadnought deck to beat your deck. So like, you can't design your deck to come back and beat us, because you were like, I'm not going to lose to Replenish, so Replenish is not going to be able to beat me. So that was like kind of the same thing, where it's just like, no, like, we had an Oath of Druids deck, right? Like the Oath of Druids land tax deck, and then like, if you thought you were going to nationalize the Oath of Druids, we were going to like use Duress and Argivian Find to make it so that Oath of Druids was always on the battlefield. Like, you needed to find a way to beat Shard Phoenix, and it's like, your deck can't, because you have all creatures that die to Shard Phoenix, no matter what, which ended up being very similar to like the thing that happens with Burn, which is just like the fact of the matter is Burn has 30 spells which aren't good against the Dreadnought deck. Like, all the Burn spells and Mog Fanatic, are just not good against the Dreadnought deck. And you can only sideboard 15 cards. And like, at the end of the day, that's just kind of like, structurally speaking, and then obviously you add in the Blue Blast, it's just disgusting. But I think that if you consult high level players, they would expand their range of like awesome good stuff to like awesome counter decks to Terraget and Replenish. And then I don't know, like, it's so weird, right? Because people are also just like, like Rich Shea is just not going to play black green Pitless Rack, black green Tempting Worm.
So it's like hard to get that data. And then of course Phil Bunch of Numbers is like, he just switches sides. He just plays black green and then he plays mono Dreadnought, right? So he might be like the best weapon against Dreadnought amongst like, you know, this quote unquote high level players. And again, I don't want to like insult anything. I'm just like talking off results, right? Phil has better results. I don't have good results compared to a lot of these people. Like Phil has great results and he's one of the black green players. So yes, I think that amongst the high end, the high ranked ladder metagame, Dreadnought is more balanced. I agree, but I think that Dreadnought is the best character at the top of the ladder. Still, it's just like you know, it's just like some people have better aim and can headshot Dreadnought sometimes, but like, you know. It's like this is just like the perfect like okay, I have a better analogy. You're familiar with Counter-Strike, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not familiar with Counter-Strike is a first-person shooter game. And in Counter-Strike, there's a gun called the AWP. It's an AWP. It stands for Arctic Winter Patrol Rifle. It's like just a giant sniper rifle. It fires one round every like it fires one round very slowly, but that round always kills the opponent. And so it is the most complained about gun in the game amongst lower ranked players, where they're just like, oh, it's like no skill. All you have to do is just like click and then you win with the sniper rifle. But amongst the people with high skill, it's like, sure, you can battle against the other people with the super powerful gun, but also it's just a very, very core part of the Counter-Strike metagame that this gun exists, and like it warps teams around it. Like people who are good at using the gun have entire teams built around them. They go down in history as some of the most talented players ever, and you know, it's just kind of a fixture. Now granted, you know, the way the game is balanced is a lot different, right? So now it's not like you can just send Counter-Strike is 5-on-5. You can't just send 5 guys out there with ops and expect to win. And so there's other balancing features like that. But I think, you know, Dreadnought's kind of like more akin to that, where it's just like super great in the right hands, in skilled hands, and then like still good in unskilled hands, and then extremely frustrating for tons of like, you know, not mythic rank people, and then even amongst, you know, it's still going to be like a huge chunk of the mythic leaderboard.
I think basically, yeah, Stiflenot is basically not player.
Yeah.
First of all, like, I don't know if you ever had lower levels where like someone's opping and you're like, okay, well, this is gonna be great. It's a 4v5, you know, this person's gonna go around like,
yeah.
Like you're trying to have played an objective, he's just gonna like sit in the corner and like try to op people.
Yeah, you're gonna flank. You're gonna flank them. You're just gonna flashbang them, and then it's just gonna be easy.
Yeah, and just like how all the, you know, submachine guns are really good against the oppers if you're in the right situation. That's the same thing in pre-modern. Like if you are playing the aggro deck that can, you know, get it up and close and personal before they're set up, you know, you're doing well. Or if you can make it so they have to play around an objective they don't want to play around, like you play a waterfront bouncer, you know, sometimes it's like close quarters and they can't like cover all the windows, and, you know, but, you know, it's an op, so they can no scope you, you know, they can do like the quick scope, you know, they can get lucky. Yeah. But like, you don't go around trying to quick scope people because it works, but doesn't work the majority of the time. But yeah, is it really frustrating? Yeah, it's like super frustrating when you're like, I'm gonna get the opera, and then they just no scope you and you lose.
You're like, yeah, that was total BS. So. Yeah, that was variance. Yeah. That was luck. So I think we're pretty aligned on there. I think that the thing that I was the thing that the final, or not the final, it's never the final, but the other thing was, I think it's interesting because the point has often been made, Sam Black made this point, you've mentioned this too, of saying like the hosers in pre-modern are really, really good. And I think it's interesting because they are super good, like compared to, or like the way in which they are compared to, you know, Circle of Protection compared to, well, I was going to say Veil of Summer, but Veil of Summer is insane. Like, I don't know, whatever contemporary sideboard card, like the color hosers, like the prison hosers, like those are like
Boil versus like Cryoclasm.
Yeah.
Boil destroys all island. Cryoclasm just destroys like one island, takes 3. Like,
yeah. That kind of stuff. Like, we definitely have these awesome hosers, but I also think that, you know, it's kind of interesting. I was playing Enchantress the other day, and my opponent resolved a Tranquil Domain. And then they attacked me down to 1. and then I cast Replenish. And like I was just like 1's not 0, and that's just kind of like how the game went from there. And that moment, in addition to the match against T-Geds, when I was just kind of like, meddling mage is awesome. Like meddling mage is crazy good. But a lot of the stuff that you're bringing out, like I have said Waterfront Bouncer on this podcast multiple times as a card I want to put in a deck that I wanted to put Waterfront Bouncer and Grotog. I was just like, yeah, this is how I'm going to solve the Call the Herd problem and the Dreadnought problem, even more so. I think that it is maybe a little bit disheartening that like, I guess I'll put it this way. Like, the hosers are good, but they have to kind of work with your game plan, or else they're effectively useless, right? You can't just drop Circle of Protection red unless you have, other things going on, like creatures that can't be burned out. Other incidental life gain, that kind of stuff. You can't just like drop Pyrostatic Pillar if the rest of your deck is still just like Shock Lightning Bolt and that kind of stuff. And, you can't just drop Sabo's Web if, you're not even going to make it to 2 mana anyways, or, by the time your Sabo's Web gets naturalized, you still have not, done anything important. So, I kind of push back on the notion that like you can make any deck beat any deck. Like, I think that you can make any deck like look a little better against any other deck, but I don't think that there's too many golden tickets out there for lots of matchups. And I think that, anything is good, but like, again, the floor of trading for Counterspell is just like, it's just like, that's just a really tough pill to swallow.
I think most matchups, like I look at the like David Raczka crew does, and it's cool, but like a lot of those matchups, it can go from 40% to 60% win rate based on how you build your deck. And like Terragon is a perfect example because I lost to it 3 times at Eternal Weekend, and then Brian Selden, that's like was one loss in the Swiss was Terragon, and I think he played it twice. So, there's more data, but basically like Terragon was one of the best things to do against Dreadnought, and then you added AK and like switches the matchup. So I think there's a lot of things like that in pre-modern, which makes it really cool. Even like Replenished, there's a lot of things where like, well, if you do this, then it's good, but if you do that, it's not. And I think it's really cool that people are responding to these things, like, oh, they're playing AK, let's play Phyrexian Furnace. Like, oh, now they're not playing AK, let's switch up to Null, or just things like that. I think there is back and forth between the top decks. Will Burn ever beat Dreadnought? No, like I know that. Like,
yeah, it won't. Yeah, I can safely say, I can safely say, upon changing 20 slots, that you cannot. It just can't be done.
Yeah, I know that. Like, but also, Stifle Knot has 4 blasts in the sideboard, and I would love to change those. Because it's basically going to slide.
Let's do it. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
Because basically all the blue blasts are doing are killing goblin lackeys and making you even on red blast. So like, you can just mulligan to turn 2 combo like you were planning on anyways, and then days.
So I played against goblins. They went turn 1 goblin lackey. So I have the combo. I have Stifle and I have a Dreadnought. Okay, and I have 2 lands. He goes attack with lackey, CG and commander, goblin pile driver. I'm like, well, can I? You
can't race that. Like, it's actually crazy.
I played this. I played the Dreadnought, and I chump blocked the pile driver. And then I died. So like, that's why you have to have Hydroblast.
All right. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna cut Hydroblast from the Dreadnought deck and throw our red matchup to counter the fact that nobody's going to bring red, and they're all just going to be playing Meddling Mage, Whipcorder, Thornscape, whatever.
Yeah, you could. I think Dreadnought is powerful. It can beat a variety of decks, but it will always have a hole. I don't think it has a situation where it beats everything all the time.
Yeah, it's just an Achilles heel that just moves around depending on where, what you're doing.
like maybe you can play something against black aggro, but then you cut the Hydroblast and now you lose to goblins. Things like that.
I am sitting here watching Brian Lonergan on Clerics against Mono Blue Tide, and he's got Dark Supplicants in play against a face-up Stifle. And I'm just like, that's not good. I was like, that doesn't work. But Godspeed. And it was like kind of interesting. I do like that the times that Dreadnought, the one other thing that's kind of funny that can happen to the Dreadnought deck is like the times it wants to be a 24 land deck and like tries to be a 24 land deck by using its cantrips. Are one thing that it can just never change about itself. Like you really couldn't play a 20 land or a 22 land Dreadnought deck, and you probably wouldn't want to play lands in the sideboard, that kind of stuff. But
I also think like a lot of those matchups with Dreadnought, like they have a plan, or like you could have a plan, and if you deviate from the plan, you can get a lot of percentage points that way. So if you know that like they're gonna bring in Tide and cut some Dreadnoughts, you can abuse that fact.
Yeah, which is sort of a veiled advertisement for the sideboard guide that you have been making available for a $10 donation to charity to anybody who contacts you on Discord. Many people think that it's my sideboard guide or that it's mine to give out, and I always have to inform them. I'm like, I actually was not capable of producing such a document. You'll have to talk to David Raczka. But it does put it does put you in a weird spot where on one hand, the more people that know, like, okay, I'll just say this now. It's charitable donation, so it's just worth it just to donate to charity. It's only $10, whatever. But it's also worth it if you just want to see what the Dreadnought players are thinking about how they're going to play against you, which maybe kind of segues up us into like talking about playtesting and if you had any insight into like the process that you're going to employ or you think people should employ leading up to, of course, the most important tournament of the year.
Yeah, I would love to talk about playtesting. I think, well, first of all, I just want to thank you, Lanny. Like a lot of people have come and donated, and so you've been a big part of that, and I do want to thank you for that. It's a big deal. That charity is special to me, and it's really cool. It makes me want to actually put more work into the guide and make it better, and it also has connected me with a lot of cool people that have all kinds of varying backgrounds and locations, and so it's really cool. Playtesting. So people play test in different ways, and people play Magic for different reasons. One thing that I do that I know some people do, but I would say I would recommend everyone trying out is playing open-handed, both sides of the matchup. And you can do this pretty simply. If you have a deck, you just bring up Moxfield. There might be some other ones that do it too, but you basically bring up Moxfield. You import your deck from TC Decks or MTG Top 8, and then there's a playtest mode, and you can have that as one side of your game, and the other side you just play paper in front of you. And the thing about a lot of cards in pre-modern, like Cabal Therapy and Stifle Knot, there's a lot of like what's in their hand. Like contemporary Magic is all about battlefield. Like it doesn't there's stuff that matters, but pre-modern is a lot more about the hand. So if you know what's in their hand, you can make better decisions. And you can see, what if I jam turn 2 Dreadnought against goblins? Like, is that a good idea, or is it a good idea to do it against Terrageddon or whatever? Land still. You can see like how often it will happen that it's a good idea, and if there's tells. And
I love that because I think one of the huge things that I borrow from poker and I've been trying to think more about is ranging opponents, and like trying to figure out, if they have any tells, like if there are kind of play pattern tells that, make it clear to you that they have or don't have something in their hand. And then also just kind of meta next leveling and trying to beat the tells, right? A simple one just being like passing with 1 mana up, like on turn 1 as burn against Dreadnought post sideboard, right? Because you're just like telegraphing the Power Blast.
Yeah. Another example would be Black White's Control. If they played an early Exalted Angel, usually they didn't have much removal. Because, like you said, with the Pyrostatic Pillar and the Pyroblast, if people have interaction, a lot of times they play slower and they don't just jam. But if they have nothing else, like if you didn't have that Pyroblast, you just jam that pillar no matter what, right? You have nothing else to do. You might as well do it, right? At least that's status quo. Maybe you next level them and
or you pass one turn and then you play Pyrostatic Pillar and then
so there's mind games, but you can see what those are, and you can make better decisions knowing what your opponent's playing. So usually that's my first step. I do that. I figure out sideboard plans for each matchup, and then I go out and I play against local people or MTGO. That I don't do MTGO, but that's another way to do it, just to see what other people are doing. Partly because sometimes you just don't know what cards do. Like you might think Vision Charm changes basic lands to a different basic type, but actually it doesn't. It changes. You can change Urza Tower to an island if you want, or it's just like weird things you never think about. You usually pop up in those live games, and then I go back to the drawing board. Anything that I lost against or didn't know what to do against, or someone threw a curveball. Like I had a local player who played Blue-White Dreadnought, but they had 2 City Brass and Gia's Blessings in the sideboard, and I was on the Brain Freeze plan. Like things like that. Like people will throw things you haven't thought about.
Oh, let's definitely just play that deck. Let's just throw out Mono Blue and play that deck instead.
Yeah, there you go. Who needs Adakar ways? Just play a few City Brass.
I'm way ahead of you on just playing 5 colors and just playing Gat Dreadnought. I mean, that's just where I've wanted to be forever. It's just like Nimble Mongoose in my Dreadnought deck sounds like the best place to be. The only problem with Mishra's Factory is that it could be Wasteland. It's like you can't Wasteland a Nimble Mongoose.
Yes, that's true. So that, and then I reiterate. So basically, I have I have like a map. Basically, that's how I have the sideboard guide that I gave Brian Selden. It was I put down everything that I sideboarded, and then I would update. And on the back of the sheet, I would just put in things that I had to remember, because I didn't want to have like a book. I wanted things I could just glance at. So, like you talk about Impulse Days gameplay, that's something I realized playing open-handed. There was times where the best target in their hand was the impulse that they casted on, while tapping out. And like, if I didn't daze it, that was like the opportunity. So it would find a card that I couldn't daze that was better than an impulse, for example. So just things like that I would put on the back and notes to myself, and I would refine things. And if things didn't work, or it also helped me know cards that matchups I had too many cards to bring in or too little, or just a variety of things. And I think the Moxfield playtesting is something that is an integral part, because I see people like miss with Cabal Therapy. Like if it's turn 5, you should hit your Cabal Therapies blind 100% of the time.
I like this, yeah.
Or you should be, or their hand should be all lands and just 1. Like that's that kind of thing. Like if, for example, if you're playing Dreadnought, and someone has Cabal Therapy and it's turn 5, and you have a Dreadnought in play, like the number 1 name is probably foil, most likely. There might be some tells here, but because like that foil, they probably are saving. They don't want to pitch it unless they have to, and things like that. So
right, it's always going to be the last card cast against Dreadnought.
Yeah. So like you use foil or maybe Gush, something like that. So just playing open-handed against yourself.
Gush is pretty sweet if you're going to have the read that your opponent has no islands and they just have Gush and foil and whatever in their hand. So you're gonna Cabal Therapy the Gush so that they won't even have the islands for the foil. So it's like a 2-for-1 Cabal Therapy. Oh, yeah. I want to do that to somebody. I want to do that. That.
And you also find interactions. So I remember playing Stoneforger Mystic decks against Cabal Therapy decks. And when I first started playing them, I would just Cabal Theory Stoneforger Mystic on turn 2, because that's a good card. I didn't want him to have it. And then I realized, I don't ever do that. I should just Cabal Therapy once they play the Stoneforger Mystic, so I can get their equipment.
Yeah.
So you can learn
it's a Squire.
Those interactions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can learn them quicker. So like I don't have infinite time. Most people don't have the amount of time that it takes just to learn by the process. So playing against yourself, you learn these interactions quicker. You learn like what decisions to make quicker too. Like, should I commit into Wrath of God or not? Like, how probable is that? Or, are there signs or things like that? Or I don't know, just a variety of things. Like, for instance, the Rock against Stiflenaught. The Rock should never play discard until a Dreadnought's in play. If they have a removal spell,
yeah, of course.
Kill Dreadnought.
Just like use the discard as Pyroblasts.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how you should play that matchup, because you win that matchup by making them have to play Dreadnought multiple times. And so you want them to like commit a Dreadnought, think they're safe, and then you're like duress, Cabal Therapy, sack Wall of Blossoms, Cabal Therapy flashback, naturalize, and then they're like, well, I didn't have 4 things. I thought you might have 2 things to kill my Dreadnought. I didn't have 4 cards that protected it. That kind of thing. So I just think that's something that is very useful. And then having some kind of way to record what you're doing, because I remember I was playing Blue-White Control in Legacy, and I played the match against Death Taxes. I tested it, but I was like, sideboard guys, it's like too hardcore. Like, I don't want to do that. So I went to the like local tournament. I played against Death and Taxes. And like, oh yeah, I practiced this, right? Game 2, I'm playing, and I'm like, okay, I just have to find my disenchant the Aether Vial, then I'll play my Terminus and I'll win. And I kept them playing, and I'm like, was digging. I'm like, I have like 2 of these disenchants. Where are they? And I didn't board in disenchant
because you forgot to.
I forgot. I put 30 minutes of my time figuring out what to do against Death and Taxes. And then I got to the tournament. I had my plan, and I just didn't execute. I just like forgot. In the sideboard, I auto lost. I just like auto lost the game because I couldn't kill an Aether Vial, and you have to. So anyway, that's my spiel on playtesting. I do have a brew. This isn't a good brew yet, but I thought I should ask you because it's basically Grotog 2.0.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. So Grotog wants to play like answers to like Oath of Druids, right? It's a really annoying card, or just like you need some catch-all answers. Psychotog is very good right now. The Kerrigan decks, you can eat your lands so they're not big. And then against Dreadnought, you can make it big enough to block Dreadnought, or it's just a good threat. Like,
it's good against everything. It's good against Call of Herd. It's even good against Beast Attack.
Exactly. So it's just a really good card. And Psychotog, a lot of times played with Upheaval in Standard. What if you played a deck that had 4 Psychotogs, had some Gushes, had Mox Diamond and Upheaval, and what you did was you would have you'd have 4 lands in play, like 4 islands, say that. And you go for your turn, you go Gush. You draw 2, get 2 islands. Then you go Mox Diamond, discarding 2 islands. And then you tap Upheaval, return your other 2 islands, Mox Diamond. And
you have a land.
You drew a land off that. Then you play Psychotog. Wouldn't that be cool? That's like turn 5, Upheaval. You have the Tog in play. You have 3 mana to their 0.
This is so ridiculous.
Yeah, that's my thought. That's my brew. And also, Phyrexian Furnace plus Psychotog solves most of the format. A Furnace, you can kill all their Terravors because they play a Terravor and you just you're furnacing them, so they don't have any lands in their graveyard. And then whenever they play Terravor, you just play the Tog and eat all your lands and it dies. And then a Replenish, they can't you have to counter Tide, but you cut off the whole Replenish line. Against Dreadnought, it cuts off their draw capabilities, and if you're an AK deck, you can get rid of their AKs, or I don't know. I would have to test it, but I'm thinking you play 4 Togs, Rotting Giant, and Meddling Mage, and then you do the fetch lands and islands. You don't have to play City Brass.
You still... No, yeah, you're fine, right? Because you just have basic Swamp and basic Plains.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Thoughts, improvements.
10 out of 10.
I've never played.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10, okay.
Everything that you said is the thing that I've thought. I've thought Psychotog's best creature right now. I've thought the only deck that could play Upheaval is a deck that contained Mox Diamond. Though my counterpoint is the opposing decks that contain Mox Diamond are very good at recovering from an upheaval, but you'll be obviously the front foot. Are you vulnerable to your opponent's Phyrexian Furnaces? Maybe not. Not really if you're going to upheaval, because that's just going to put so much material around. The other question is, when you actually do it, could you have the hilarious outcome where you cast upheaval and you do all this stuff and then you actually just end up with like 3 cards in hand? Like, because you used to upheaval with 9 lands, right? And then you'd have like a handful of lands and spells. But like in this like Gush Mox Diamond stuff, you're casting Mox Diamond so many times that you might not actually have, because so you had 4 lands. You would have pitched every land to Mox Diamond if you cast it 4 times in one turn cycle. So I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like sitting there, I'm like, wait, you just 2-for-1'd yourself 4 times in one turn. Like, I'm just like, this obviously you have Psychotog, so it's awesome, right? But what if you actually Mox Diamond yourself so hard that your Psychotog can't even deal enough damage? And then like
maybe instead you upheaval and you drop a Meddling Mage on Mox Diamond for your opponent's Mox Diamond.
For your opponent's Mox,
Rotting Giant. Yeah, and you play Rotting Giant and you just hit them for 5 every turn.
It just sounds like we can just do whatever this is and also play Phyrexian Dreadnought. Like,
sure. Hey, upheaval into Dreadnought with Mox Diamond. Let's go.
Yeah, Gush AK. So we get Gush AK. Flash of Insight can come too. Psychotog Escape Hatch. Upheaval reduces the necessity for playing Tide. Furnace is just a control card that lets you do something different. I would love to build this deck without Dreadnought, because I don't think Mox Diamond belongs in Dreadnought decks. I think that you can only 2-for-1 yourself a few times a game, and you're going to do it, do it with Dreadnought, do it with Mox Diamond, but not both. I've tried to prove myself wrong about that. I've built plenty of, it's like, oh, you've got Gush, you can play Mox Diamond. And then, fact of the matter is it's just like so weird how just like not having a card is such a big deal. But yeah, it makes everything worse. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that 1 plains, 1 swamp could be like a little bit tricky. Because your 8 sources aren't really 8 sources. You play a couple Dromar's Cavern, couple City of Brass, a random Undiscovered Paradise, whatever. This deck could play City of Traders to cast upheaval. Just 1. I guess you can't. City of Traders is so bad in blue decks though, because you just need blue pips. Interesting.
Yeah. Ideas. That's my thought process right now. I think Psychotog needs to be played more. I feel like that card's just. I mean, it's like the best creature in pre-modern, other than Dreadnought.
Can we play?
I mean, those are really good.
Can we do this? And our deck is Psychotog, Gush, Upheaval, AK, Tireless Tribe.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe instead of Rotting Giant, you play Tribe. Tribe just like eats red for breakfast. Like they can't do anything against that card.
Yeah. And then because like the Gush is one way to give you volume for the Tribe win, and then Upheaval is just a hilarious way to win with Tribe. Just like,
are we gonna play Strength of Lunacy so they can never kill any of our creatures?
Strength of Lunacy. Oh my god. Strength. Okay, so then we should play Wild Mongrel too.
We're playing like
our Creature Suite. Creature Suite is Wild Mongrel, Tireless Tribe, Psychotog, and then we get Strength of Lunacy and Circular Logic. We are in the City of Brass zone, surprising no one.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like Wild Mongrel makes the mana base too bad. I'm not into the Force City of Brass kind of plan. I like this because it can be all basics. You can literally just play like 2 or 3 planes and 2 3
I do love all basic lands. I've been racking my brain trying to figure out a deck that can play fewer than 20, like maybe 22 land maximum. But if you play Mox Diamond, obviously like 20 land would be a great place to be. And then just playing lots and lots of basic lands, using card draw, Miri's Guile stuff as you're fixing. I've been obsessed with Lay of the Land. I'm like Lay of the Land has.
You have? I built a buddy a domain control deck that played 4 Leyland, 4 Mox Diamond.
Yeah.
Because Leyland is basically Terramorphic Expanse.
Yeah, it really is. And it's excellent. It's awesome. Like, I think Lay of the Land is just it, because basic lands are so good. Like, you can play Global Ruin, you can play Ruination if your deck is like, all basic lands. So you're playing a 5-color Ruination deck. It's just like, it's so good. But
and you get evasive action, which you don't have to, because like Counterspell's just like so premium. But if you're playing more than like 2 colors, you just can't play.
You can never play Counterspell.
Yeah. So, but evasive action, counter unless you pay 5 is basically always good, especially if you have Global Ruin in your deck.
Yeah, it is always good. Yeah,
it's just it's really good. This is my Sam Black brew. You ready? Mirror's Guile. Yeah, Mirror's Guile. You get Mirror's Guile in search of Sylvan Library. Okay, and then you get Sylvan Library, and then once you get that, you get Abundance, and then once you have that, you just try to get like 3 to 4 Sylvan Libraries in play and draw 9 cards. And get back to
multiple Sylvan Libraries.
Yeah.
Listen, if you're gonna Mirror's Guile
how do I get this?
If you're gonna Mirror's Guile for Sylvan, just play Enlightened Tutor, okay? Like, it's okay. Just play take your medicine and cast Enlightened Tutor. I promise it won't be so bad. I played 4 Enlightened Tutor in Parfait, and nothing bad ever happened to me. Like, people are just so scared of casting Enlightened Tutor. I'm just like, listen, you can do it. You can do it. If you play Duress in your deck, you can especially do it.
I just don't know if you want to play white. Like, if you're playing white, you play the Enlightened Tutor. But if you're playing green-white, you're basically a dog to replenish, right? So, like...
Yeah, no green-white deck has ever beaten replenish.
Yeah, I mean, you could try, like, Geddon and Aura Silence and stuff, but I'm kind of iffy on that. So I was thinking you probably need black or blue to try to beat the replenish decks. And that's like everyone's trying to beat Dreadnought. I'm like, how do I beat this replenish deck? Like,
yeah,
I don't want to lose to that. It's so good. I mean, it has holes. It can lose, but that's like one of the hardest things to beat. Like, I'm like, I want to play the survival deck. I'm like, well, there's replenish.
Yeah, replenish. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, the Vice script has 2 arms, right? And one of it's Dreadnought and the other is Replenish. And the things that beat Dreadnought don't beat Replenish. And the things that beat Replenish don't beat Dreadnought. With the exception of blue-white Flippy, baby. Turn 1 Weathered Wayfarer for Wasteland Chains. Turn 2 Meddling Mage. And if that doesn't work, we just have good old Mana Leak. We have
you got the Waterfront Bouncer. And
we have Standstill.
You got... I don't know does he play Gilded Drake? I don't know, but
it can. It can. It's a blue card. It plays Reverent Mantra. It can play Gilded Drake. Okay, like if talking about narrow cards that you never want to cast. Like, I'm with it.
The good old. You can also play Parallax Wave with Gilded Drake. You steal a creature, then you wave out your Drake, and it comes back, and it's a good time.
Yeah, these blue cards and white cards are pretty good. It's just like the only solution to the blue menace is other blue cards that happen to be good against blue. It's just like, it's like, that's my plan. I'm with it. I think, I think it's really, really it's really, really tricky. I think it's easy to sort of feel like a little dejected. I do think that we're not trending in a great direction, and I think that but this has been a good conversation of really kind of pinning down some things and bringing up some interesting points. And look, I'm watching the Duress Crew coverage right now, and I'm seeing a lot of non-Dreadnought I'm seeing Dreadnought lose a lot on coverage, which is the dream, right?
Yeah. What round are they in? Are they going the top 8 yet?
I think they just concluded round 6, and I assume that 100-person tournaments are 7-rounders because it's 5 for 32, 6 for 64. No, so it's 128. So they might just do 6 rounds for 100 people. But they said an X2 is also going to make the cut. But they're just flashing a bunch of deck lists on screen, and so far, we have not seen any Dreadnought. And we did just watch Dreadnought lose on coverage. We watched Clerics lose on coverage against the Parallax Tide Menace. So not the best situation. But it looks like, according to the Chiron, it's round 7. goblins against land still. So it looks like a 7-rounder with a cut to top 8. So we don't know what happened yet. I'll contact my spies. But yeah, I think I'm here and I'm just like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put more kegs and dominates in our Dreadnought deck, and we can't lose to any of the things that beat us that are permanents, because between keg and dominate, the only remaining permanents are what are the remaining permanents?
Tradewind Y Rider. How about
Tradewind Rider? Yeah, you can't really dominate a Tradewind Rider,
and you can't keg it. You're never going to get to 4 if they have a Tradewind Rider.
Yeah, the keg's not going to get to 4 unless you're very, very preemptive. But luckily, the thing about those 4 mana spells is that they get counterspelled, so they can port you off the counterspell. So Weathered Wayfarer, Tradewind Rider. It just sounds like we made another flippy deck. Okay, blue white. Our homework for the listeners. Blue white flippy. Keep working on that. No reason that doesn't beat both Replenish and Dreadnought. Although blue white flippy was catching losses to Replenish at a few tournaments, if I recall correctly. We've got Upheaval, Psychotog, Tireless Tribe. Not sure how that one's going to take shape, but feels like there's something there. And then we've got Lay of the Land.
There you go. These are my top 3 decks. If you want to beat Dreadnought, you can play Psychotog. Any kind of Psychotog, you're probably going to win.
Just blue-black Psychotog.
Nulls.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to beat them up. You can play 4 Null, 4 Phyrexian Furnace, 4 Meddling Mage, Land Still. Or you can play Enchantress. I think those are, and then Mono Black Aggro. Those are all great decks. I would be surprised if 1-0 Dreadnought players made top 8 at the Dress Crew. What do you think? What's your prediction?
So I think Rich chose not to play Dreadnought, and I think if he had, I would have just locked him in. Like, I would have laid like 4-1 against on Rich top 8ing with Dreadnought, but I think he played Replenish instead. And other than that, Nick Pinn is the other Dreadnought player that elected to play Mono Blue Tide instead. And I don't know if any other Dreadnought senseis are at the tournament, so I would not be surprised
Brian
if it's
Selden.
Oh yeah, Brian Selden, but he just got
Carl Winter.
Yeah,
round 1.
He just got cooked. It was round 2. They were both 1-0.
Battle of Champions. Oh, round 2. Okay.
Yeah, and he just got cooked by his Anded Swarm, and he's in Twitch chat. So I think his how could I forgotten? Okay, so Selden got knocked over, but that's because he was playing AK Dominate instead of AK Dominate and Tide.
Well, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of testing still need to be done on that deck, but that's a perfect example. Fab has 4 survivals. I don't know how many Xanted Swarms, but that's a lot of permanents you have to counter.
Yeah. I asked McLean also if he could just swarm, like go swarm survival and then survival up Meddling Mage. So that you can keg the swarm, but they survive up another swarm, and then obviously you can't beat the Meddling Mage. So that's a lock. Swarm into survival is good. I think survival and the fittest decks in general are good. Obviously you can get turn dude, but if you're in game 2 or 3, you can be kind of like Xanad Swarm plus Naturalize gets the job done. Maybe if your mana's good enough, you can go Xanad Swarm into survival. They get the attack in, but then you get the tabby. So survival decks in general favored. But yeah, still reports of Elves players being like, oh, lost 2-0. They just turn 2'd me twice and I didn't have it. And I guess you're supposed to mulligan. Or both sides are supposed to mulligan and basically start with, between 4 and 7 cards that must contain Naturalize and must contain Dreadnought combo. Goblins in this, this might be a win and in. It might not be. Both players have 2 losses, but who knows? Yeah, I like that though. I think Mono Black aggro is like the biggest question mark because the Cleric's deck does not look like an aggro deck to me, And like obviously the Priest of Gix type stuff, you know, is pretty aggressive, you know, but and then Enchantress is definitely a compelling one. There's not like, I don't know where the Enchantress Cabal is. I don't know where all the Enchantress Sickos are. Obviously Chris Tolar still playing that deck. And then what's the other? Oh, Psychic Talk. Yeah, no, just nobody's playing Psychic Talk. So should be something that people pick up, and then maybe they pick up Upheaval, Mox Diamond, Psychic Talk. How many Upheavals are we playing in our Upheaval Mox Diamond deck? 2, 3, 2?
Two. You play two. Yeah, but also like Psychic Talk. Like I was like do the math. You do a Psychic Talk in turn 3. Turn 4, you go Fact of Fiction Gush. It's lethal. It's basically a Dreadnought without the extra steps. You just like play it and you just kill them. You know, you can play Wonder and just like fly over, or you can even play Brawn if you want to trample.
Are we playing Intuition in our Upheaval deck?
Well, so the problem with Psychic Talk is there's about 120 cards you can play, so you just decide what you want to do. But like Intuition for 2 deep analysis and a Wonder kind of looks pretty amazing to me. But also, like, do you play Sapphire Medallion?
Yeah.
Sapphire Medallion into triple, like if you have Intuition to triple deep analysis, or is like, I mean, what do you even do there? You just have so many cards.
Yeah, you're just cooking up different ways to like go from 0 to 7 cards from no matter what. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, and Upheaval. You know, I just want to have. If I don't have 11 cards in my hand, I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah,
you
are very on brand.
You're like, yeah, this. I need all the cards. If I don't have a quarter of my deck in my hands, I don't know what I'm doing. Well, why am I not doing it?
You should, yeah, exactly. What's the point of doing it? You should check out Sam Black's Enchantress list. Then you're gonna do a lot of that, and then the puzzle is like trying to figure out how to keep exactly the right number of Enchantresses in play so that you don't deck yourself while you're looping Replenish Seal of Fire.
This sounds amazing, but I just like wonder like why do you have to play red? Can't you just go green white?
Because Seal of Fire is like Seal of Fire, Firestorm, and Pyroblast are just so good. Like they're just amazing. However, it did just occur to me that my favorite 1 white card happens to be an enchantment and triggers enchantress. Wait, hold on a second. Kurtar's Desire and Enchantress? Are you kidding me? We haven't done this? Are you kidding me?
Why haven't we done this?
This is it's so sitting good. Right there. Oh my god. I just don't even have to play red. You just play Kurtar's Desire.
And it's perfect against Oath of Druids because they're like Terravore, and you're like, well, I'm going to Kurtar's Desire. Now we're even.
Oh my
you have
god.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Well, there you go.
So, like, you have Seal of Fire. What if you just had Swords? You have Firestorm. What if you just had Parallax Wave? You know, that's like some kind of stuff.
Well, Firestorm is cool. Super bananas because don't get me wrong, Parallax Wave is the obvious like thing to include after Kurtar's Desire because Sam's deck plays the Seal of Fire and the Swords of Postures, like that's the point. So we'd have to change Seal of Fire for the Kurtar's Desire.
Got it.
But you know, like the only downside is you can't Kurtar's Desire your Argothian Enchantress if your opponent's not playing any creatures.
That's true.
But
I do like that. I always feel like Alvin Grass is like such dead weight. I would love to have a Kurtar's Desire instead of that most of the time.
Yeah.
Unless I'm playing like it's like 5 creatures.
Yeah. This feels I mean, like, don't get me wrong, Seal of Fire has tremendous upsides because it happens to be a very elegant way to like have as a win con, right? So the whole point of Sam's deck was just he cut Opalescence and Words of War or whatever, or he could cut Opalescence and Words of War, but you know, you could still just play one, like, I mean, I don't know, Opalescence is doo-doo butter, but it's fine. You can play it. You have enough white mana from Sarah Sanctum. It's just it's fine. You just play 1 because you have Gaia's Blessing, so you can just play 1. So it's fine.
Okay, yeah, not too bad. You don't get in that weird thing where you have both, and then they get animated, and they get rid of them. And stuff.
Yeah, they can randomly Wrath of God or whatever. It was interesting though because I played like the Enchantress Mirror, and the Enchantress Mirror is like just about who's able to get 2 Sterling Groves into play first. And because there's no way to interact with your Enchantress opponent when they have 2 Sterling Groves. So you're like Sterling Grove, Salt Solitary Confinement, and if your opponent's but like then your opponent has solitary confinement. So then you're like, great, though I have blessing, but then my opponent had Phyrexian Furnace, so it was just like
so Sterling Grove is only you.
Yeah, Sterling Grove is only you.
Okay. So it was like you can still block, but
well, you don't have to block because you just have solitary. So
yeah, that's weird. It's like the prison on prison stuff. It's like the one card difference matters.
Yeah,
like, hey, have main deck Crypt or Furnace or whatever.
Yeah. Well, you have to have Crypt because you have to be able to stop your opponent's replenish sometimes. But like, I mean, I guess you don't have to. You don't necessarily have to, but you have to if you're Sam, because like, your opponent's replenish can make it. Well, I guess it just doesn't matter if you get the 2 Sterling Groves, but the replenish obviously allows you to buy back your Seal Cleansings, which are the most important because the Seal Cleansings keep your opponent from having 2 Sterling Groves. But yeah, I don't know. It was like a super weird spot where like one game I lost because they just like I was down to like because they had double Sterling Grove early plus solitary confinement, I couldn't Seal of Fire them, and then they were eventually able to just Phyrexian Furnace my Gaia's Blessings because that my win con became decking them, and then I couldn't do that, and then it's just silly. It's silly when you have like 5 Enchantresses in play and your deck is not divisible by 5, so like you kind of like have to sacrifice your Sterling Grove so that you can Seal Cleansing your own Enchantress's presence, and then you have to bless your presences back into your library so when you replenish you have 1 fewer presence in play. Oh my gosh. So like, yeah, that's if that sounds like fun to you.
What if you just play a ground seal? Yeah, then they're like you tutor up their ground seal and you're like, darn, my blessings.
I just realized you can't crypt an opponent. You can't crypt your opponent if they have solitary confinement in play. Yeah. That's my kind of magic right there. Yep. Well, it's a pleasure catching up and talking to you. I feel like you still kind of got a little bit of that, T'Challa stuff going on. You've been more active in the chats, I've noticed, recently, and you're kind of got your hands in every archetype. You're talking it up with the various things. And you said you're going to Lobstercon?
I'm going to the old school one. I just had a beautiful baby girl.
Oh, right.
That's why I've been.
Congrats.
I've been more active online because I'm just,
watching her. Yeah.
So, but also I can't really get out to Boston in 2 months. So I'm hoping to go to the old school and play some.
Well, it's fine. You'll just be responsible for cooking up, I'm sure, the Lobstercon 2025 winning deck list, which, you teased here first. Last time we didn't listen to David when he said that you should be playing a deck. This time, listen up. Upheaval, Psychotog, Mox Diamond, Rotting Giant.
Well, old school, what deck draws most cards? Total Vault. So that's what I'm hoping for.
It's Total Vault. Because we're playing Swedish this year. Because you can't play Total Vault in one of the random formats, right?
Eternal Central, they ban it basically.
Okay.
Or they restrict it. Yeah, you can't really play it there. But Atlantic, which is normal, Lobstercon, and then Swedish, you can both play it.
Okay.
But you have Howling Minds out. It's kind of like you 5 cards a turn. You get up to
Can we play Howling Mind in pre-modern? Is there like a way to make this work? Like my other obsession is like I really want to play a deck with Ivory Tower because gaining life is so good, but nobody does it.
Yeah, I don't think Howling Mind's better than Sylvan Library Abundance Ivory Tower combo area. But I mean, there were decks that played Howling Mind with Boomerang effects, so you could try to port that over to pre-modern. It could be good, it could not, but it does have Black Vise, so you just kind of make it so it basically like probably the Stasis variant probably is in there too. So it'd be like Turbo Stasis, where you just like play all the boomerangs and you play a land, you play Black Vise, they play a land, and you like boomerang it, and you're like, well, take 4.
Interesting. I mean, I think Howling Mine is always rough because it helps them get out of their stasis lock, but it does make sense that you would play some form of prison, and blue prison, obviously. But I guess we'll have to save that for another episode. It's always good to have a doctor's visit on the podcast. Do you have any last words?
Not too much right now. I'm excited for this Duress Crew event that they're doing. I'm going to tune in right after this and see what's going on there. And I just hope everyone enjoys brewing and tweaking and playing pre-modern, because it is super fun.
Yeah, I agree. Still an awesome format, and definitely one I look forward to building a deck that doesn't only care about the early game, but also beats every single version of Dreadnought that you could possibly conceive of. That's my dream.
Enchantress. Play Enchantress. You can do it.
I mean, the Enchantress is pretty good. Like, the only thing is I have to put Words of War back into the stupid deck because I'm so over trying to like make this Seal of Fire loop thing happen. I'm just like, okay, like once it gets to the point where you have all the permanent, you're changing all the zones and all the permanents, I'm like, I do not want to do this. I'm like, just let me tutor.
Or just do green white. Green white, you just finish them off with the Opalescence combo. It's tech for
yeah. I mean, now that I have Kurtar's Desire, I'm definitely more into that idea. And because it's white too, which is like so important because you never have enough green mana, but you always have like thousands of white mana. Man, Kurtar's Desire. I'm going to Kurtar's Desire enchanting my animated Sterling Grove, I guess.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought you were going to say Hidden Gibbons. You're going to have like main deck Hidden Gibbons. So then if they don't have creatures, you have the Gibbons. Because if they don't have creatures, they have to have instants, right?
Yep.
So you have the Gibbons in there so that you can always hit your Kurtars on something.
All right. That's the dream.
Well,
yeah,
it could be a pleasure, Leonie.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, good stuff.
Good stuff. Enjoy talking to you. I hope your woes of Dreadnought are a little bit comforted, but it's understandable. It's a powerful deck.
I think that for me right now, it is very evident that I could just be playing Dreadnought. So I'm trying my best not to, is where I'm at right now.
One of the best ways to learn how to beat Dreadnought is to play Dreadnought. That's what I did with Replenish. Is I couldn't beat Replenish from Dreadnought, so I played Replenish and I figured out how they lose, and then that's how I came up with the Tide stuff. So
yeah, I'm down.
Yeah, maybe you'll come up with something if you lose enough with Stifle Knot. Then you're like, I'm just going to join what beat me.
Yep. That is the idea. That was the thinking, but I'm not quite ready to play land still. And like I said, I think I had it for Terragon, but this is just the beginning. Still plenty of time. But yeah, I can't understate. I love chatting with you, and I also just still to this day am floored by your perspective and the level of insight you have into these kinds of things. It's it inspires me. It keeps me sharp. It keeps me like looking for the angles because, it's awesome. You have a perspective that I think that a lot of people don't share, and you come up with these, sometimes you point out stuff that's hiding in plain sight, and sometimes you point out stuff that's out of left field, and it's all just, it all just broadens the horizons for me. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much. And I'll end with my favorite quote, which is, don't play good combinations of bad cards, play good combinations of good cards.
Cheers. Love Spike Colony.
That's how I brew.
All right. Cheers. Take care, dude.